Hello and welcome back to this Downplay Dualistic Crusade. This video is my review for the long-awaited and something we finally got on disc, complete animated series for the legendary Batman the Animated Series. This is the slimmed-down, non-fancy swag package that most of us hoped for, but we had to wait a little while till they got rid of the limited edition package with the Funko Pop figurines that caused many people to have issues due to damaged packages showing up everywhere. So finally, Warner Brothers decided to release the animated series on disc in HD, featuring brand new transfers after the runaway success the Warner Archive division had had with their standalone releases in 2017 of Mask of the Phantasm and in 2018 of the Sub-Zero feature film, these two being the primary feature films coming off of the animated series. So that showed the studio label that the interest was there to release the animated series on Blu-ray, which is hard to believe they would need convincing since the fan base has pretty much regarded Batman the Animated Series as the definitive adaptation of The Dark Knight on any screen type, whether it be television or animated series or feature films, ever since its inception in 1992, where it pretty much took the not just the comics world, but the animation world and the Batman fandom world by storm, and has remained both myself and most fans' definitive idea of the Bat mythos and the Batman universe of Gotham City, down to the fact that whenever one is reading comics, it is very hard to not hear the various animated series character cast voices in your head. It's impossible to not read Batman dialogue and have Kevin Conroy's voice going in your head, or Mark Hamill doing the Joker, or and so on and so forth, because this show was that definitive at recognizing both the light and dark elements in the entire back history of the Batman universe and adapting not just famous comics, but also the famous characters and the rogues gallery, but reinventing them in ways so it felt both relevant for the 1990s at the time, but also had a classic design, which goes right into Bruce Timm's designs for the characters and Eric Radomski really pioneering what became the show's dark deco aesthetic of painting everything on black backgrounds instead of white backgrounds, traditional for animation, and really shooting for a strongly film noir inspired look that was heavily inspired by the legendary Fleischer Studios Superman theatrical cartoons from the early 1940s produced for Paramount, which were a new breakthrough in animation techniques and really, I think, still are quite possibly in my opinion, the greatest animated production ever. But were, of course, limited due to the fact that they were 10 to 12-minute theatrical shorts, almost like a serial chapter, whereas the animated series had, in addition to the beautiful designs and pulling from all aspects of the Batman mythos over the many decades of comics up to that point, the entire production team, really spearheaded by Alan Burnett, and Paul Dini coming on as story editor, strove to tell the best darn stories they could, regardless of if it was going to be okay for children's Saturday morning viewing. Of course, the series premiered on the Fox network as a primetime show, very much showing its very adult intentions. But the show did a very good job at working with the Broadcast Standards and Practices Censor Board to get through as much as they could and work within the constraints of the time. So on-screen deaths and things like that and heavy gun usage are not really there, but they're there just enough to give you the implications, even though they're not having to show anything. And it forced the entire team to be even more creative, resulting in many changes to original scripts that actually bettered the original shows. The animated series really is one of those lightning in a bottle moments where everything comes together in all the right places and all these people are in the right place at the right time. That time and place being Warner Brothers Animation in the early 1990s, which had started a sort of renaissance with Tiny Toon Adventures and other shows. And when the green light was given to produce a Batman show based off the enormous success of the 1989 Batman feature film, basically the call went out among everybody working at the studio, and various people came up with different ideas. But it was, of course, Gene McCurdy approving concepts by both Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski, and then pretty much putting the two of them together that resulted in that first pilot film test that was okayed by the studio, and that is what started the ball rolling on what became Batman the Animated Series. And so they started picking up various members of other crews and people they'd been working on other projects like Tiny Toons at Warner Animation, and then bringing in some outside help, writers and technicians and staff and animators. But if you look at the production history, you can see all the main names start to come into the fold, and everybody realizing that this was their chance to do something a bit different, to finally pay tribute to the comics they adored, the character they adored, while giving a little tip of the hat here and there to the sort of Tim Burton vibe, so that way they could play into the success of the 1989 film, and of course Batman Returns that was on the way, but still do their own thing and do a true representation of the Dark Knight detective on screen that could, on one hand, be very much the Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams 70s Batman reinvention, but also have elements of the first year, 1939, Bill Finger, Bob Kane, very dark Batman that was very much shadow inspired, while also maintaining the lightness that is necessary to counterbalance those from the Silver and Bronze Age Batman from the late 40s getting into the 50s, and especially in the early mid 60s, and the occasional nod to the Batman 66 show, but that of course was primarily what they were trying to get people away from. It's also interesting to note that these were not all comic book people. Eric Radomski himself really only knew the Batman 89 film, and that was what convinced him, hey, this would be a cool idea. So it's great that they had this sort of melting pot going on, and then as various other people would come through on different episodes, they could sort of integrate themselves into this that was already going on, of hardcore Batman fans passing Batman fans and people who didn't even know anything but the 66 show, in which everyone would do the same reaction when they said that. No, we're not doing that. So it's a fascinating show to research. It's a show that has such longevity because it really spawned what became the DC animated universe that is still running in various iterations to this day. Occasionally they do tiptoe back into the animated series type of design. There have been one or two directive videos that have referenced that, which I'll get to when I get to the Blu-ray set. I want to mention the third feature they did that maybe should have been included in this box set. Animation has had a complete reappraisal in the studio system and in the public eye. Animation is now much more considered an art form, whereas back in 1992, the primary focus was still on Saturday morning cartoons for children, and you couldn't do very much with that, or so people thought. And it's really Batman the Animated Series that sort of, I mean, there had been other shows that approached things with more adult themes and tried to do what they could through the censorship boards, and were not just about being a glorified toy commercial. But Batman the Animated Series sort of took everything to another level across the board in terms of its production, its writing, its voice cast being primarily drawn not from the regular pool of voice talent, but actually going for theater and stage and film and television actors, and with a bringing together such a production crew where every person is such a key facet of the team, and at the absolute top of their profession, even if they didn't necessarily have the clout or credit for it yet. But when you look through and you see all the big names that were on this show that are all legends in the realm of superhero animation, or within the comic book fandom, or within the Batman fandom, it's amazing that all these people are in the same place at the same time, from Bruce Timm to Eric Radomski to Alan Burnett to Paul Dini to the incredible voice director Andrea Romano, and then you get to the incredible voice cast that is just iconic for every single performance. And of course, when you have Kevin Conroy voicing Batman, it's just the textures and layers that he injects into the performance that are when combined with the beautiful scripts of the series that could range between the light and the dark and the introspective and the chasing the rogues gallery and run the whole gamut of everything a Batman story can and should be. It just becomes another level of experience. This is not simply a cartoon. Conroy himself said that what struck him immediately was that the entire Batman character and story, which he was unfamiliar with going in, struck him as very much being more of a Shakespearean tragedy, and how that was really his end point into getting inside the character's headspace. And he's exactly right. That is the main draw and what keeps us so invested in the character. It is the humanity in the Crusade, and that's something that so many adaptations, put in the back seat or unfortunately jettison altogether. Or it's so buried that a lot of the core of the Batman character really is not present. So it's not just fun to go back to the animated series, but it is like going back to the source in such a way because it distills so much of the comic book history. Again, not just from 1939 Batman, but the 40s Batman and the 50s Batman, where everything went wacky in science fiction, and the Silver and Bronze Age, and the 60s Batman, and even some little flourishes of the 66 Batman show and its inherent campy humor, but then also the 70s rebirth of the Dark Knight, especially the O'Neil Adams period, and then the grittier 80s period, the Frank Miller Batman, and then where Batman was at in the 90s, post Batman 89, and also drawing some inspirations from the Tim Burton films. So it's a distillation of all of that, and it's so perfectly rendered that basically any Batman fan, regardless of what era of the Dark Knight you prefer, or if you like a lighter Batman, if you like the Dick Sprang Batman, if you like Batman fighting dinosaurs in the 50s, if you like Batman 66, if you love The Dark Knight Returns, you can always recognize Batman in any of the episodes or the stories. It's never too much of a light perspective or a dark perspective. There is the perfect balance between the two that gives an extra dimension of reality to the proceedings. And that, combined with the fact that you have an entire production team, voice cast, and writing staff, and brilliant music by Shirley Walker and the other episode composers, doing their absolute best, not acting like this is just a cartoon. Everybody going in with the mindset that each episode is its own miniature movie, and that everybody was giving it 110% every time because they didn't know if this was going to work. And when they could do another episode, they gave it everything they had. And this was also in the pre-digital realm, where everything was still done by hand, and then the episodes would be shipped overseas to various animation studios for the animation process, and they'd have to wait for it to come back, and they'd have to hope that it turned out well, and only the most minor errors could be fixed. Outside of that, there was always going to be some variance between the episodes. Some would be animated more strongly, some would be from a studio that wasn't as good, and you can kind of tell. So there's a sort of fluctuation there that adds an element of the episodes having character and feeling alive. So it's a series that's forever fascinating. It's something that stuck with me. I grew up with it. I grew up in the middle of it pretty much. And of course, Mask of the Phantasm, the theatrical feature, was released in 1993 in between the first two seasons. Now, it's important to note that the show is pretty much broken up into, they're described as seasons, but they are more of a production order. So when you're looking at the complete animated series, you basically have the first season of sorts is the first 65 episodes that were produced, and that usually gets labeled as season 1. Then there was a second order for 20 episodes, which was rebranded The Adventures of Batman and Robin, where Robin was more prominently featured, but it was still a continuation of the animated series. That second order of episodes, 20 episodes, comprising The Adventures of Batman and Robin, brings the total episode count to 85. Now, once that was done, that technically marks the end of the first run of the series, with everything using the original animated series designs. After this, they would produce the Sub-Zero feature films. That's the second feature. That was released direct to video, and that also uses the original designs, although it has some CG sequences added. And that technically marks the last official appearance of original animated series design story material outside of returns and one-offs that happen years and years later, but of the original production team and design and everything. Sub-Zero, the second feature film, really marks the end of that. By that point, they'd already switched over to doing Superman the Animated Series, which did have some crew change-ups, so some people did not go from Batman to Superman, and they went for a different design aesthetic, and it's a much brighter show, because of course it's in Metropolis, as opposed to Gotham. But after they've been doing that for a while, Warner Brothers decided they wanted more Batman episodes. So that led to the creation of the Superman Batman Hour, where you had a Superman episode and a new Batman episode. That show order, which is usually considered its own season, but in a lot of ways should technically be a separate series, since it has a different style design and a different crew changeup, came to be known as the New Batman Adventures. This featured much more on the extended Bat family, brought in some new characters, and radically changed the art design, opting for a more streamlined approach, very much in line with Superman the Animated Series. So basically, the show was redesigned in the Superman mold, but with some aspects of the animated series staying on, some characters not changing very much, others changing a lot. Most of the same crew came over to that, but it was, of course, also different because there had already been a change-up going into Superman the Animated Series. So it is always bundled in as part of Batman the Animated Series, which makes sense, but it's also technically its own show. Tonally, it is quite a bit different, but some episodes do feel more like the classic animated series. But it should be understood that when you're talking about the animated series proper, you really do have to make a distinction between the original 85 episodes and then New Batman Adventures is slightly separate. But I am glad they are, of course, packaged together. It makes it a lot more convenient, and I think they should be bundled together if you're doing a complete series box set. But it is a little bit misleading to label the New Batman Adventures as also Batman the Animated Series. So that brings us to the Blu-ray release. As I said before, Warner Brothers originally released a limited edition package with all the discs in a custom art book, but with the sort of cardboard slot pages, which are terrible for scratching up your disc. But the bigger problem was that was packaged inside of a bigger box due to trying to accommodate some Funko Pop figurines. Now, every copy of this box that existed pretty much was damaged in shipping or transit. It caused a lot of problems. People kept returning them. A lot of fans were unhappy, and the list price was quite expensive for the series. So a lot of people, myself included, waited and hoped that they would do a box without the swag we didn't need, without the Funko figurines, and we finally got that about a year later with the complete animated series box. This has everything nicely in two simple large cases, so all the discs are actually on hubs in a proper case, as they should be, and really this is all you need. Some of the art on the fancier box was nice, but the price tag and the figurines and the fact that you were going to scratch your discs up by getting them in and out of those slot pages was not a good thing. So it's pretty simple outside of that. The box is just a plain slip box. They do nicely include a episode guide insert, so this gives you the breakdown with the discs and the extras. So the discs are broken up in, again, two cases. There are 12 discs overall, so the first volume merely gives you the discs in a traditional case. They all have the same matching art with the Gotham skyline, so it's a little plain, but it's serviceable. And then the rear has Batman and the Joker. I have to admit, the actual art design for this, while I'm thinking about it, it is on the generic side. It's fine, and I'd much rather have standard cases than a fancy book where the discs are poorly packaged. But you could have done a lot more with this, even though it is the standard version. It's okay. It's very simplistic though, and especially when you compare it to the beautiful fold out digipacks on the DVD releases, it's a night and day difference. So that is one of the reasons why I am hanging on to my original DVDs. But the other I'll get to when we talk about the transfers. So volume 2 of this is the exact same manner, but this one puts Robin on it, which is befitting that this also contains the Adventures of Batman and Robin episodes. The rear has Robin and Two-Face. Now here you get the rest of the discs, plus the bonus disc. And then the last 2 discs are the original Warner Archive discs for Mask of the Phantasm and Sub-Zero. So these fully replicate what are on the standalone releases. So you really don't have to have these, but again, we all went out and bought these as soon as they were released, and those numbers convinced the studio to release the box set. So I've just hung on to these because I like having individual cases with the individual art sometimes, and they're really cool, and I couldn't bear to get rid of them because it was such a brilliant thing to finally have them on Blu-ray. And again, the spines up close break it up into part 1 and part 2. And it all fits on the shelf nicely. It's very simple and straightforward. And to be honest, I would much prefer something like this as opposed to a big box of swag where the discs are just thrown in there willy-nilly without any care to the actual, collector, and also any care for the discs themselves. So I would much rather have a simple, more inexpensive package like this where the discs are in proper cases than a box of swag where, again, the discs are going to be scratched up or possibly destroyed. Now, if you're curious about the extras, all the extras from the DVDs are carried over. This also includes all the specific episode commentaries from the original cast and crew, which were recorded for these DVD sets. Those have been carried over. The first handful of episodes with the little Bruce Timm intros that were on the DVDs, those are on the Blu-ray as well. All the little featurettes are here. So those are spread out as you're watching through, so they are on their respective disc with those particular episodes. It also contains the video commentary that was done for one episode, so that has been ported over as well. When you watch that, it goes to the original standard def episode from the DVD with the little it's a picture-in-picture type experience, but it's already imposed in the episode. So that whole program has been reincorporated on the Blu-ray, so you don't have to worry about that. All of the new extras are on disc 10, which is the bonus disc. This gives you all of the new featurettes and a full-length. It's split into 2 parts, but it's really one full feature-length documentary that, again, is split into 2 parts with a little musical interlude. Now, unfortunately, the specific extras that were made for the complete animated series DVD box set that had the beautiful limited, art case and came out, I think it was 2008, and it was out of print very quickly and usually goes for high dollar amounts on the used market. That had a couple of exclusive extras and a featurette that unfortunately were not replicated here. I don't know why. Outside of the fact that most of that information is gone over in the new feature-length documentary, so I guess it was seen as maybe repeating themselves, but they already did that with the other DVD extras. So I wish that had been carried over, so this would be fully complete. But that's the only extra that has not been carried over. So if you do have that particular box set, you will have to hang on to that for the specific extras on that complete DVD box set. But everything else and the majority of, I guess the 95% of all the other extras, so everything on the original DVD sets is carried over, so you don't miss out on any of the commentaries and the featurettes. The new materials include The Heart of Batman, which is basically a new featurette about the show's legacy, and you get various talking head interviews of both original cast and crew and then people today. Again, it's pretty much about the show's legacy and its continuing impact, so that's always great material to have. And it's pretty lengthy, and it's got some substantial bits in it. It's not just your usual generic again, talking heads just blabbering on about a show. But the primary documentary is split into 3 parts. So the first part is called Batman Season of Darkness. Then there's the musical interlude piece in between the 2 sections. Then the second section is called Season of Light. Now, when you watch all these together, it's about it's a little over 90 minutes, so it is a feature-length documentary. And what's great is you get more of an in-depth background to the lead up to the show's production than the actual production process, and how everybody kind of felt like a sort of ragtag group of people who are having to prove themselves. And they actually go and talk to all of the important people. So you have all of the key crew members talking very openly about the experience, everybody from Gene McCurdy and Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski on down. And it's also really rewarding to hear from people who were just kind of more starting out then, like Glenn Murakami talks about how he was, much lower on the ladder as sort of an up and comer, and so he worked his way through the ranks through Batman and then onto the leader shows. So you get a perspective from all sides, and it's chock filled with all these vintage, office photographs where everybody's in their offices working on Batman, and they're talking about their experiences in a very down to earth manner. And being such a fan of this show, I could listen to any of these guys talk for hours on end, and it's never enough. So I only have two real issues with this documentary. One, I could have watched it for 3 hours and I could have watched it for 5 hours, and I wouldn't have been bored. So it is the best anybody's done on the animated series. It's far better than the old vintage featurettes that are just 5 or 10 minutes of people having to say the same things over and over. So that's only a minor point. I wish it had been longer. But the real issue I have with it, and it's not as bad as it sounds, but it is something that I did notice. They use a lot of background music for running underneath the entirety of the documentary, and while the music is not quite what you'd picture for a Batman the Animated Series documentary, it's much more electronic and synthwave and stuff. I mean, it sounds nice and it's kind of cool, and eventually you kind of get used to it, but it is a bit loud in the mix, and it's always going. So I wish that wasn't there all the time. So I know you have to have music in a documentary to keep things moving, but it was a bit loud in the mix, and it was a bit omnipresent. So I wish that had been dialed back a bit more. But that's my only nitpick. It was a far better documentary than what I expected. I expected something much more along the lines of the usual DVD type featurette that the show has had before. So I figured it might be 20 minutes to an hour. So I definitely didn't expect a feature length documentary. And the way it's split up with the musical interlude in the middle, it's kind of cool. It adds to the atmosphere. So I definitely recommend watching it all together in one go. It is much more substantial than what you usually get on things like this. So my hat's off to them for doing that. And then the last is a very short piece about the conception of the Harley Quinn character. So once again, Paul Dini has a little tiny interview where he talks about the creation of Harley Quinn, which also was done in some of the old DVD extras. So that gets covered again. It's just a little tiny thing. So at least that's on there as well. So again, this gets you all the extras plus the new materials, except for the lone extras in the complete DVD box set. So unlike some of the other animated shows on Blu-ray, this does not miss any major materials, and the feature-length documentary is a real treasure for fans of this show because it gives you more of an inside glimpse into what it was like producing the show in 92, 93, 94, and it is far more substantial than what you'd expect. Now we get on to the transfers themselves, and this is where I have a lot to talk about. So the shows were originally broadcast and produced on film, but then, released in their edited broadcast form on tape. And they had to be prepared and telecine back in the day. And they had to be specifically color timed for broadcast standards. The show was very famously dark and had to work around broadcast standards of the time. So when that meant producing the DVD releases for the first home video complete series release, they were working from those original tape sources. So that preserves the original look of the show in broadcast, but it is limited to standard definition and with the constraints of those tape sources. So when you go back and you watch the DVDs, you're going to see all kinds of, aliasing pop up and chroma noise and all kinds of old yuckiness baked in to the actual transfer process. I'm not exactly sure if the extra compression down to DVD may have added into that a little bit, but it seems like a lot of that was kind of baked into the source. But it does preserve the original broadcast look and appearance of the shows. So that's why I think it's very important to hang on to the DVDs, because in the HD transfer process, because they were going back to the original materials, that means that they don't look exactly the same. And there are specific things that will have vividly different color or shadow detail differences. A lot of people notice the iconic opening title sequence, without any titles, of course, the iconic moment of Batman the Animated Series, its opening. It looks distinctly different. Things are a lot brighter. It feels a little bit different than what you're normally used to from watching the old source. So that will pretty much let you know what you're in for right off the bat. Everything is so much clearer and you see so much more detail that you didn't see before, but it is a different presentation than what the original timed broadcast masters were like and what was preserved on the DVDs. Now, efforts were taken to match things as closely as possible with, some supervision from the original crew and Bruce Timm looking over the HD transfer process, but there is some variation that's introduced. Some people are okay with it, some people can't stand it. I understand why it happened. It's something that's going to happen in animation anytime you go back to original animation cells or original film materials and you retransfer it and it doesn't have those same broadcast limitations. Something similar happened when they finally transferred the classic How the Grinch Stole Christmas television special in HD, and all of a sudden the Grinch, who was always sort of a dull yellow color on all the old broadcast versions and all the old video masters, was suddenly this bright lime green, and it looked so wrong to my eyes and a lot of other people, but that's apparently what was on the original animation cells, and it was just over the years and the broadcast standards. That stuff got changed. So anytime you remaster something, this type of stuff can happen. So there is some variation, and I do think that in some aspects you may lose a tiny bit of the moodiness of some of the compositions and some of the shadows and things. Not that anything has been changed, but it is a little bit different. On the other hand, the dramatic jump forward in terms of detail and color reproduction and everything else is enormous, and it is unbelievable seeing the first couple episodes when you first start watching the Blu-ray release. And if you look at the DVDs before just one more time and then you jump over to the Blu-rays, I mean, the difference is dramatic, and you really get all of the drawbacks of the old masters really magnified if you then go back and look at some more episodes on DVD, or you look at some of the standard def episodes that are on various extras, or when you see clips of the standard def episodes. The difference is a dramatic night and day experience. So I think the Blu-ray set is essential for any fan of the show or any fan of Batman, because again, the new scan of all the original episodes is a dramatic leap forward. The problem becomes that this was not done by the Warner Archive, who took great pains to properly restore both Mask of the Phantasm and Sub-Zero to make sure they didn't erase any animation in the dust removal process, to make sure that they transfer the audio correctly, that they didn't introduce any errors, and that they presented discs with proper transfers that had maxed out bit rates. Because this was a release handled by the Warner Brothers Studio label, who likes to cut corners and cut costs and do everything on a as minimal effort as possible basis, there are many errors and issues in the actual episode presentations themselves that got introduced at some point, either in the disc authoring process or the manufacturing process or the mastering process, that were not probably there in the original scans and are not problems on the DVDs, for example. Some of these have been reported on before. There are far too many episodes are crammed onto too few discs, so the compression levels are not very good. They're okay, they're serviceable, but you will notice some things like occasional banding, and if you look at the bit rates, they are a bit low. Just for example, all the episodes are on 9 Blu-ray discs, whereas back in the DVD era, it took 16 DVDs for all the episodes. And while, Blu-rays can hold more data than a DVD, the sort of ratio applies still, where you do need a certain amount of discs to hold all the episodes properly. So the fact that it was on all 109 episodes are on 9 discs, whereas when the Warner Archive releases, say, a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, they max out their bit rates and you have multi-disc presentations. For example, the Masterpiece Johnny Quest series, which only had one season of 24 episodes, is a 2-disc Blu-ray BD50 dual-layer disc release from the Warner Archive with maxed out bitrate presentations, and is one of the best animated Blu-ray releases ever. It is a must-own Blu-ray release. So that should give you an idea. If the Warner Archive had done this, it probably would have been more like, at least 10 or 12 discs just for the episodes, if not maybe a couple more, just to give them that extra breathing room for space reasons. So this isn't as bad as, say, what Warner did with their release of the classic Scooby-Doo Where Are You series, where the compression was awful and that had some added digital noise reduction, so it doesn't even look as good as the streaming versions. It's not as bad as that, but this is the same standard studio label we're talking about that has done similar things with other animated shows, that when certain titles in those animated realms get released by the Warner Archive, they get beautiful presentations, and they're working from the same sources the studio would be working from. So unfortunately, the studio label does not have the same quality standard that the much smaller Archive division has. So the worst part of this is the Archive division did not get to do Batman the Animated Series on Blu-ray, and that the studio division did. Right off the bat, you have to deal with the fact that they should have at least had another disc or two for the episodes so they had better compression. That's one thing. I know most people aren't going to really notice that, but it is something that I think is important and should have been addressed and in the planning stages, but wasn't. One of the other major problems with this release is the usage of DNR pretty much everywhere across the entirety of the series. Since this is a studio release and not a Warner Archive release, it's pretty much going to be a given that there's going to be some DNR applied to the source transfer. It's really unfortunate because this should be a beautiful looking presentation. So in addition to the compression issues and the issues with banding and shoving too many episodes on too few discs, like the standard studio label likes to do with a lot of animated shows, there is a pretty significant usage of DNR across the board. Now, it's not going to be anything that's going to ruin your experience. It doesn't give the full-on waxy faces type approach, but this is cell-based animation, and it is important that things not be erased, like actual parts of the cells and some of the original sketch lines and things. So you will notice its presence rear up occasionally, much more than usual on certain sequences and certain shots. And if you were to still frame or just continually pause on certain sequences, you'll notice the slightly softer looking appearance. Again, this is really unfortunate because the source scan is beautiful and it's a brand new scan, so it should be a beautiful looking transfer. And had this been handled by the Warner Archive, we wouldn't have any of these problems. So As with pretty much every studio release, I wish they would have just let the archive division handle it, because they wouldn't have applied all of this DNR, and they wouldn't have shoved the show onto too few discs. The case in point being the way they handled the Hanna-Barbera library. The Hanna-Barbera library has been retransferred in HD and restored by Warner Brothers at, I believe, probably their MPI in-house division as usual, but the shows have been split up on the studio label and the Warner Archive. When the studio does it, it's a mess, like the Scooby-Doo release or the new Scooby-Doo movies release. Too few discs for episodes, so they're all crammed in on, with too little space given for the compression. There are DNR passes done on the shows. Some of those, the streaming versions, are okay. I don't know on BTAS. I think probably I haven't heard anything, and I don't stream. But as far as the DNR usage, I don't think those escaped unscathed, unfortunately. But when the archive division does it, they don't put any DNR application on the shows of the Hanna-Barbera library. So there's a perfect case in point example. And had this been done by the archive, we wouldn't be talking about this or the compression issues. So unfortunately, DNR does rear its ugly head. I mean, it's a necessary tool, but it's frequently overused, as it is here. And its application really was unnecessary. Now, it is not done as just like a sort of blanket method. A lot of the original cell dirt is still present. You will see dirt and splotches appear very infrequently, but they do happen. So that's great to see that at least some of the original cell dirt, made it all the way through. That was something that Bruce Timm and everybody was always concerned with in terms of, transferring the show again. That's why they, stuck with the DVDs for so long, or at least part of their rationale was they wanted to preserve the sort of baked-in look, which is another reason, again, why it's important to have the DVDs for the original broadcast appearance, but also the original, full cell dirt and everything baked into that old transfer. So it's really unfortunate that these problems have happened. Again, all this was unnecessary. It's just the usual Warner studio label hijinks that you have to sort of get used to. And these things do mar this set, unfortunately. So you will definitely notice the DNR usage. It's not as bad as it could be, but it's definitely there on every episode, which is unfortunate because this should be a beautiful looking presentation from these gorgeous new scans, and it just isn't. Now, another thing you'll notice occasionally is a little bit of gate weave. Particularly, it seems to be in the title card sequences on the original 85 episode run that all had their own individual title cards. So it's okay. It's very, very minor. I only noticed really bad gate weave on one particular episode in a few spots, which I'll mention when I get to the more specific video errors on the actual individual episodes. But I did notice a sort of continual thing where in the opening title cards on the original 85 episodes, you will notice there is quite a bit of weave of the image sort of hobbling around a little bit. Nothing bad, but it's just a thing that popped up, and since the rest of the shows, with the exception of one episode, were pretty much rock solid, I guess it was sort of nice to see in a way, meaning that they didn't completely over manipulate the original animated footage, so maybe that's just baked in, but it was interesting to note that in a good portion of the opening title cards there was some gate weave. Again, very minor, but it is noticeable. One thing I will note about the title cards is they're iconic, and it's a shame they didn't continue for the new Batman adventures, but as beautiful as they look in HD, on one particular one I noticed it looked very strange. So on the episode Catwalk, one of the better Catwoman episodes from later in the series run, the title card looks very digital. It's the weirdest, probably the best way to describe it. It looks very pixelated, and I don't know what happened there. I don't know if it was maybe a digital painting, but the DVD of that episode seems fine for the title card. So I don't know if that's just something that got goofed up as well, but it is noticeable. So when you get to that episode, the title card looks wonky for some reason. I don't know why. Now, some fans have noticed that there were a few original animation errors that were fixed in a handful of episodes, particularly some of the more obvious ones in the Moon of the Wolf episode, in terms of colors being wrong, or some of the clothes and costumes changing from shot to shot. So a few little things like that have been fixed. I didn't go through every episode with a fine-tooth comb comparing to the DVD. I'm sure there's probably a few more that were just light tweaks or fixes that may have been done before the HD transfer. I don't know exactly, or they might have been retakes that were just not able to be put into the original broadcast master. But there are a few of those scattered throughout, which is nice to see, and it's definitely something that the original team was involved in. It's not something that was done after the fact by somebody else. So it's all intrinsic stuff. So if you don't know these shows like the back of your hand, you'll have no idea that anything was fixed like that. But if you're a very astute fan of the series, or you've read the more detailed reviews, you already know about some of these, or they'll be very obvious. But there's a handful of those. But again, I'm sure there's probably maybe a few more little touch-ups that were done. But perhaps an even bigger problem, and one that really is frustrating, is all of the little errors and ticks and things that are wrong, including the fact that several episodes have completely defective audio that should have been caught at the quality control stage, which seemingly is non-existent for most releases these days. But there are at least 4 episodes of this that have noticeably distorted and defective audio tracks. This has been much reported on by various fans, and if you can actually you go back to the DVDs for those specific episodes where the audio is perfectly fine, and I know some people have actually captured those tracks and resynced them to the Blu-ray releases. Now, those episodes in particular are the Cape and Cowl Conspiracy, then the episode Avatar, also the episodes House and Garden and Harlequinade. Those are, a mixture of episodes, but the latter 2 are 2 of the best in the series, and the fact that all 4 of them have defective audio that will be noticeable to anyone and has been talked about on many different internet forums, and again, fans have had to go back to their DVDs for those particular episodes where, again, the audio is perfectly fine. Those should have never made it past the released stage. They should have been addressed. They are completely defective. They are distorted, tinny, scratchy sounding. It's very much a problem when you're trying to watch these episodes, whereas the picture is perfectly fine and looks fantastic in terms of it being the new transfer in comparison to the standard def original DVDs. But for those episodes in particular, you will need to go back to your DVDs. So that is the primary reason why, outside of preserving the original broadcast appearance of the shows, you will need to have your DVDs for the audio on those particular episodes. I will also say that I noticed myself in one of the new Batman Adventures episodes, if you're counting them all together, this would be number 95. That audio was not quite as bad as the defective ones, but it did sound not as good as the rest of the episodes. It was noticeably poorer, and I went back to the DVD of that particular episode, and it sounded fine there. So I kind of group that in with the 4, so I think it's possibly 5 episodes that have defective audio. But that's just in terms of something that should have been caught and is a major disappointment for this release, outside of the compression not being the greatest and not having enough discs for all the episodes. But if you thought we were done with the audio problems, like what most reporting and what most forum discussion stops at, is the discussion of the defective audio on 4 of the episodes. But if you thought we were done with all that, oh no, that is not the case, because unfortunately, I also got further derailed when I was rewatching the series on this Blu-ray release and taking some notes to prepare for doing this review. I started finding more little quirks and errors and things in terms of the audio having issues. And this is something I've not seen discussed anywhere else, but it's something that I noticed very much because a lot of times if I'm watching something late at night, I use my Sennheiser monitor headphones, which are very revealing of sound quality, shall I say. But I started noticing there's a particular issue in terms of the presentation of the iconic opening and closing credits that have to deal with the actual musical score. There are a number of episodes right off the bat where parts of the score are cut off or missing due to the actual timing of the episodes. Particularly in the end credits, there's a number of episodes where the music starts too late or it's missing a few beats. There's also also a number of the end credits on the shows where the timing isn't quite right because the music is supposed to go through the end credits and then the final fade out goes into the Warner Brothers logo and then, final fade out for that particular episode. It's a particular dramatic flourish I've always enjoyed about the way the show ends. And of course, the end credits music is just so incredibly rousing that anytime that's off, it really kind of irks me or takes me out of the moment. Of course, on original broadcasts and on the DVDs, a number of the end credits were rather hilariously sped up because the episodes had run a bit long and they were supposed to fit a certain time block, and those were left that way on the DVDs. So I'm used to that. So it was going to be great to finally see all the shows without any of the end credits sped up. But I didn't expect some episodes to have pieces of the score missing or the timing to be off. But this also goes for the iconic opening titles, which rather bizarrely has. At first, I thought it was just two different variations or versions of its presentation. But then I quickly found there were three, and then perhaps four, maybe five. Now, it is hard to compare all 100 plus episodes back to back to back. So anytime I noticed it was one of these variations, I would just make a little note on that episode number. But what I mean is, when you look at the famous opening title sequence with the iconic Shirley Walker theme music, the actual mix is different across the episodes. And unfortunately, a good bulk of them use a mix that is seemingly defective. It actually buries and almost mutes part of the opening music. I don't know why this occurred, but it is very noticeable because some episodes will have perfectly fine audio for the opening credits. Then immediately the next episode, parts of the score are muted. You'll notice this in particular in the nice crescendos of when you first see the Batmobile taking off, the overhead shot of the Batmobile coming out of the Batcave, and then cutting to the criminals running away from the police car chasing them. You'll notice that in that version of the sort of muted score, that those particular crescendos are almost muted or more buried in the mix. And then there are some versions of the opening title music that the whole actual track sounds muted. There's one particular episode where there's actual distortion in one of the channels of the opening title music. I believe it's on the left channel. Then you'll also notice that some versions of the opening title music don't have any added effects to them. The opening title, as seen most often when it's not with any of these mix issues, will have some little flourish sound effects like the rumble of the Batmobile starting up when the flame comes out of the rear engine exhaust, and a little extra flourish when the Batarang knocks the two guns out of the goon's hands, things like that. So one of the first 10 episodes, I believe it's episode 6, does not have the effects, so I call it the effectless opening version. That is randomly on that episode, and it pops up a number of other times out of nowhere. So again, if you watch a bunch of episodes back to back and you really pay close attention, you'll notice there's a bunch of variations in the opening title sequence. And then because the new Batman Adventures episodes simply reuse the animated series opening, which is not correct because they had their own opening with the Superman Batman custom title, most of those episodes randomly chose to reuse the effectless opening. So if you go through the set, you count the number of times, that effectless opening appears 29 out of 109 times. So if you're trying to keep count of this, essentially out of the 109 episodes on the Blu-ray release, and if you're looking specifically at the opening title credits, I've counted about 29 of them have the effectless opening. Then about another 30 of them have some sort of mix problem, whether it's muted score, distortion in one channel, or a different more muted mix of the actual opening score. So in total, that's about 60 episodes where there's an audio issue or some variation in the opening title sequence. So that is about 60 out of the 109 episodes. The rest of those are perfectly fine and all sound exactly the same. You will also notice, if you pay very, very close attention, that the actual final fade out of the theme music, when after the lightning flash and the iconic image of Batman standing on the rooftop and fading into the darkness, the last thing you see are the eyes fading off into darkness. Well, on most of the defective or weird audio tracks, there's a hard cut where the music literally cuts, whereas it is supposed to fade out for another second or two. And on the okay episodes, it does have that extra second. So if you pay really close attention, you will see that a good majority of the episodes, the last little tiny second or two fade out of the opening title music is cut off. I watched these sequences way too closely, I'll admit it. Because again, I didn't expect to start finding this stuff, but the first time I came across one of the episodes with the sort of muted music in the opening, I was like, okay, this is really weird. I'm not exactly sure if this was somehow intrinsic to the original production and that there were just a bunch of different versions of mixes of the opening title music. But when I went through the DVDs, they seemed mostly the same. I didn't check every episode, but I sort of spot checked a few. But it is possible that could somehow be part of the original production, but it just seems really weird because Warner Brothers would typically, when they're doing animation, they restore the title sequence, and if there's nothing wrong with it and it's exactly the same for every episode, they just reuse that over and over because that means less work to do. So somehow this happened. Usually they just reuse the same sequence, and that causes problems because, as on their restorations of the Fleischer Superman cartoons, those had custom titles for almost every episode or every cartoon, and because Warner Brothers reused the same audio, that caused a lot of problems in the Fleischer shorts. So here, there's a lot of variations all over the place, and why it happened, I have no idea. But I haven't seen anybody talk about this. So there are issues with the opening sequence, and there are issues with the end title sequence, and then there are at least 4 episodes with completely defective audio that should have been the instigation of a recall of this release, because those should have been fixed. And again, I would also throw in a potential 5th episode in terms of having possibly defective audio as well. So you'd think we would be done with audio problems, but no, we have some more. As I said before, the sort of second season of the show became retitled The Adventures of Batman and Robin, with its own opening title sequence and custom end credit sequence that also had its own custom end title music. Unfortunately, a lot of this stuff has gotten mixed up on a lot of home releases, so the DVD sort of mixed those episodes in with also having opening and closing Batman the Animated Series traditional credits from the original run of the show. That continues on into the Blu-ray set, which for the most part has the correct opening titles with the Adventures of Batman and Robin sequence on all the episodes. It's when you get to the custom new Batman and Robin end credits that you have a lot of problems, because for some strange reason, a good number of these episodes, they randomly have the animated series classic end theme music over them. And while I don't necessarily mind these shows having the animated series opening and closing because they're so dramatic and iconic, and they are better than the Batman and Robin intro and exit, this was a slight change in the show, and that's how these shows were produced, so they should have their correct opening and closings. So of these 20 episodes, about 12 of them have the wrong credit presentation. There has been some discussion that maybe this was fixed on the streaming versions, and so we're just stuck with it this way on these discs. But you will notice that when it ends on this particular run of the show, you'll get the red end title card with the new Batman and Robin logo, and it'll have the animated series end credit music. Now, some of the episodes, again, about 8 of them, I believe, if I'm remembering my count, have the correct music. So you will notice the difference when you watch these 20 episodes that some of them have the correct end music and most of them, unfortunately, don't. And as I said before, this also goes into the new Batman Adventures, which had its own custom intro sequence that was, the all new Batman Superman Adventures. That's how these shows should open, but all of them open with the classic Batman the Animated Series opening. Again, I don't necessarily mind this because it is sort of in the same realm as the animated series, and the end credits for New Batman Adventures go back to the style of the animated series end credit sequence. But they should have the option to watch them with the correct opening sequence, which you did get on the DVD release. So that was something you could do. You could choose which you wanted, or at least on most of them, if I'm remembering correctly. But that's another technical issue with this, that the new Batman Adventures don't have the correct opening sequence either. So that takes care of the main audio portion of errors. Now, in the video realm, outside of the compression issues, there really aren't a whole lot of major things. They are much more of a minor list of various things that I noted, but some of them are a bit odd. Some of them are explained by materials not being available for film transfer, I think, and some possibly being an early sort of attempt at a digital effect or something that was unfortunately stuck in standard definition. But others were introduced in the authoring or mastering process and should not have happened. The end of episode 3 has this weird bit at the very end where all of a sudden there's a fade out, but then it comes back up, and then we're in the end titles, but then we're back in the fade out, and then the end titles are back up. So they totally messed up the final transition from the end shot of Nothing to Fear, the first Scarecrow episode, and into the end titles. That's something that just threw me off immediately the first time, and at first I thought maybe there was some dirt on my disc or something, so of course I rewound it and played it, and the same thing happened several times, so I realized it was a glitch. So I checked the episode further, and I think perhaps it's a disc encoding error, because when I play it in various players, that's when the problem comes up where the end credits fade out, well, the final fade out of the show into the end credits. It's just messed up when you're playing back the disc. But I had to actually go into my PC drive and I'll admit I took this a little bit further because I was trying to get some screen caps anyway. So I actually found the episode itself is fine if you actually rip it as an MKV, as if you were, going to put it on your own home media server. So the episode itself is fine. It's the disc encoding that's messed up. So anytime you play episode 3 from the disc set, so from disc 1, and every player that I've tried, the something went wrong in the encoding. So when it transitions to the end credits, it's sort of just totally messed up. So that's unfortunate. The next one is in episode 9, Be a Clown, right at the end of the episode again, where the mayor's reunited with his son, and they have the moment where they embrace. This is right before the moment that's become an iconic GIF on the internet of animated Batman giving the thumbs up. So when they embrace, all of a sudden that shot is very desaturated of color. It is quite a bit noticeable. The rest of the episode is perfectly fine. The shots around that shot are fine. So I don't know if it was somehow in the original film elements and not corrected in the transfer process, or if it just somehow got goofed up that way. When you go to the DVD version of that episode, it's perfectly fine. So that's another little goof that, again, it's possible it could have been in the original film elements and was just missed in terms of correcting it, or it was just goofed in the process of making this disc release. Because the show was animated in the pre-digital realm, there are elements that will make it through, or mistakes, or things that are a little wobbly, or the natural elements of a hand-drawn, hand-animated show. So when things like that pop up and they're a bit more obvious, shall we say, because of the HD transfer, that's obviously not an error in the Blu-ray. That is just because the transfer is so much more revealing of shots that are maybe a little wonky, or where the animation's a little rubbery, or it's a little off in some spots. This is the type of stuff that the main show team, is cringing and dying in their seats when they see the show rerun, and they're seeing all of the problems because they know the show back to front because they made it. So when you see this in HD, you are much more able to spot some of those things. So again, things like that, I'm not going to mention because that's just part of the intrinsic nature of the production itself. But there are one or two spots where it did seem very strange, like the opening of episode 40, which is the first Riddler episode. If you're so smart, why aren't you rich? The whole opening of that show, the animation looks and feels a little bit weird, and the audio seems a bit muffled and indistinct. The rest of the show is fine, so I don't know if that's just something inherent to the actual film elements and just how that show was produced. They did actually make an adjustment to the subtitle that's hard-coded in the episode. It was on the DVD, it was a bit off-center and everything, so they redid it for this Blu-ray. That's one of the handful of things that some people have found that they did fix, in terms of there are a couple problems or things that were mistakes that they just didn't have the time to fix, where they adjusted them. It's not like they did a CG edition or something, but there are a handful of things that they did take the time to address like that. But just the opening of that episode in particular, for some reason, it just felt really off in both the animation and the actual sound. But also the rest of the episode is perfectly fine. Then we jump to another Riddler episode, Riddler's Reform, where all of the sequences that take place at night outside in a rainstorm are noticeably honestly, I can't tell. I think they might be an upscale of standard definition footage, because you've got some jaggies here and there, you've got some artifacts and things, and it obviously is not from the same HD transfer source as the rest of the episode and the rest of the show. So I think it's probably because of the way they did and achieved that rain effect that that whole sequence is noticeably softer, noticeably degraded. There's some artifacts and, again, some jaggies everywhere. You will notice actual visible artifacts in that sequence. And then as soon as they go back inside and the rain is over and it cuts back to the rest of the beautiful restored picture, that's totally done and over with. So I think that is simply because the way that was originally animated, and I think that's probably baked into the source that way. So because these shows were originally, broadcast on tape and edited on tape, it may have been an early digital effect and it's just stuck that way, or it was edited on tape that way and it's stuck that way, and they can't possibly redo it without just completely redoing that whole sequence. Now, the same goes for episode 82, the lockup episode, where there is a rain sequence on a ship towards the end of the show. It's a very brief bit, but it does seem reminiscent of that same sequence in Riddler's Reform. Not quite as bad, but it was a little bit softer, and it is possible that it's the result of the same process. Then in episode 89, getting into the new Batman Adventures territory, there's a particular issue. This is the Double Talk episode. At about 11 minutes in, there's a particular pan, and while the panning movement is going on, there's a real stuttering quality to the animation that felt a bit weird and off. And then lastly, in episode 102, the Old Wounds episode, there's a number of instances of frame wobble and just literal actual movement of the image itself. It starts around the first flashback sequence at about almost 3 minutes in, but you will notice some movement as if it's literally moving around in the gate. It's not too terribly much, but it's really jarring because it's the only instance of that throughout the entirety of the 109 episodes. So that's it for the video issues. Again, it's just a handful of things I noticed, and I'm not talking about the specific, more revealed bits of the original animation being much more obvious, because again, that is intrinsic to the source and the show's production itself. So ultimately, these add up to some real frustrations with this release, that they are things that should have been addressed. They are things that should not may have made it past the QC process. The video ones are fortunately minor. There are some color timing inconsistencies here and there fleetingly with some of the original presentations. There are one or two bits in that are perhaps questionable. There is a particular New Batman Adventures episode where once Two-Face makes a broadcast, that all of a sudden there's a sort of almost a teal coloring to most of the rest of the episode for some reason. I don't know why that happened or if that was somehow intentional, but it is an actual change that, again, some other people have noticed. But outside of that, the video issues are pretty much minor ones or perhaps a minor glitch or two. And again, I think the rain sequence in Riddler's Reform, I think, is just the big example of having to use some original standard def footage and then incorporating that into the new transfer and upscaling it. I think that also might have something to do with the other an only noticeable bit of softness in any of the episodes, which is the Lion and the Unicorn episode when Batman and Robin arrive in London and they have the fight aboard the double-decker bus. Due to the way they tried to light and show off London and the London fog and the street lamps, there's a very soft quality to that whole sequence that really stands out, and I think that is just baked into the way that sequence was originally animated. So what I'm really trying to say is the video quirks are minor compared to the audio problems. The biggest of those being the defective audio on the 4 primary episodes. That should have been fixed. These discs should have been recalled if it was not caught in the first place, which it wasn't. Unfortunately, this didn't happen, and again, I'm not sure if this was eventually corrected for streaming versions, as apparently some people have said they did fix the credits issue on some of the streaming versions of the particular episodes. So I don't know if the streaming versions of those episodes in particular with defective audio tracks have corrected audio tracks. It wouldn't be the first time that Warner Brothers did a fix for the streaming versions, and basically the discs are stuck as version 1 with the errors baked in. But that is the biggest issue with this set is the defective audio. And I think you can extend that to all the defective bits and the opening and closing sequences for all the episodes, because they are so prevalent and there's so many different versions of them and different ways those are affected in the episodes. So if you're like me and you wind up paying closer attention to things like that, or little quirks will jump out at you and make it very obvious, you will notice them. But again, I don't think anybody else has done what I did and actually taken notes when watching through all 109 episodes anytime I noticed something like that happening. And again, these are just the things I noticed. So the defective audio is so obvious that it was noticed pretty much right off the bat, and it has just never been addressed by Warner Brothers officially. That is a major problem. The episodes are still watchable. The picture is great, and you can still make out the dialogue, but it's just not pleasant to listen to because the audio is so distorted and crackly, and it just does not sound good at all. And again, the DVDs are fine. I would like to mention that the audio transfers for all the other shows, while it is lossless audio, they are improvements over the DVDs. Some, it feels almost like they went back and did fresh transfers of the mixes. The scores are more dynamic. I don't think they remixed anything because it's still the original Dolby Surround encoded stereo mix, but it is a pretty big improvement over the lossy Dolby Digital 2.0 that we had on the DVDs. However, since the audio on the Blu-ray is so much more robust outside the defective audio episodes, I think the original DVDs have that same, as I alluded to before, that baked in original broadcast sound as well as appearance. So there is a distinct audio improvement on all the other episodes outside of the issues with the opening and closing titles and the defective audio episodes. So don't let the bad episode problems of those 4 or 5 discourage you from the rest of the set, because all the audio tracks on all the other episodes are really quite impressive, and they are dramatic leaps forward over what we had on the DVD in terms of the actual quality of the dialogue reproduction and everything. I think right off the bat, when you start watching through the episodes again, when you get to episode 4 and you start hearing the music that fans either love or hate from the Last Laugh episode, it's very obvious the dramatic jump forward the audio has taken in terms of the presentation on the Blu-ray over the DVDs. And again, the show never really had much surround usage, so if you engage your surround decoding for the Matrix audio, you're not going to get very much. It is pretty much still stereo oriented. There's a little ambiance here and there. There's a little bit of the dialogue going into the center stage, but for the most part, you really are fine just listening to this in undecoded, just regular 2.0 stereo. A lot of animation did start mixing in Dolby Surround like Batman the Animated Series did, but it took a little while for more and more animated shows to take more advantage of that. And really, even by the mid to late 90s, there were still not a lot of shows that were taking more advantage of that. You get a little bit more of that usage in Superman the Animated Series, but it took until the time of Batman Beyond and Justice League and later DCAU shows where they would take a bit more advantage of that. In terms of something closer to BTAS, you can watch a Batman the Animated Series episode in Dolby Surround, and then say if you jumped over to a competing series from around the same time, the relaunch of Johnny Quest, The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest, that series from 1994 has a really pretty bombastic Dolby Surround track that really surprised me going back to that show. I had no idea it was mixed that way. So that is an example of what animation could do with Dolby Surround, whereas Batman the Animated Series, the sound design is much more limited to it's pretty much stereo with some ambiance, and the music and effects kind of will spread out a little bit more, but it's already perfectly mixed for stereo. That's not always the most necessary thing to do, is to watch it with Dolby Surround encoding engaged. But I do like to mention that because the show is encoded that way, and most of the times people just say, "Oh, well, it's just stereo." Well, not really. There's a little bit of stuff there, but it is pretty much stereo oriented. One last point I would like to mention that stuck out to me: the menus are the very typical generic Warner Brothers style. They are static menus, which is fine, it's easy to navigate, but what's really annoying is they use the menu music from the fourth volume for the new Batman Adventures. The DVD menu had a couple extra special options, so it had this little beeping noise effect that tied into the extra bits of that menu. So for some reason, instead of using any other piece of the music or the main theme, they took the music from the DVD menu of the fourth volume with that little beeping sound effect. So all the discs of the Blu-ray set have that. And if you leave that menu on, you're going to hear that darn beeping over and over and over. And you're going to wonder, well, what the hell is that? Especially if you've never owned this DVD. Because as soon as I put this in, I'm like, wait, that sounds so familiar. Isn't that the... And then I went back and popped one of these discs in again, and it's there. And I'm like, well, that's just a bizarre choice. So I don't know if that was an accident or somebody just grabbed the wrong file or somebody just put that there and thought it was fine. I don't know, but it's a very bizarre choice, and you're going to hear that darn beeping a lot. So if you wondered where that came from, it's the fourth volume of the original DVD release's menu music. So that was just weird. I don't know why they did that. Another thing that I think is missing from the complete animated series box set is the fact that the third feature based in the Batman animated series universe, though it came later, is not included. That is, of course, the 2003 film Mystery of the Batwoman, which I covered in a separate review. This was produced by some of the main regular personnel. The story concept was by Alan Burnett, but this came in 2003 after the Batman Beyond and Justice League series. So this retains the stylings of what was in the new Batman Adventures in terms of the character designs and the whole look of the world. Kevin Conroy voices Batman, and you have many of the regular personnel in the crew, like Alan Burnett and Kurt Gita, among others. So it is within the DC animated universe. It is a direct-to-video feature, but it definitely is within the animated series world, and it really probably should have been included with the other discs in the set. I think it does have its own identity, but it does directly tie into the animated series by using some of its characters, specifically the character of Rupert Thorne, who was not in the new Batman Adventures, and they had to make a custom design model just for this feature film. So this is using not just the new Batman Adventures designs, but it's using an actual animated series specific character. So I think it should have been included. This is the 2011 regular studio Blu-ray, which unfortunately is a rather disappointing transfer. It's okay, but it would have been great had they included this film, had they done a nice new re-encoding job like Warner does on rare occasions, where they spip up an audio codec or change an old VC1 disc to MPEG-4 encoding. That would have been great, because this is in need of an overhaul. The transfer in here is not that terribly good. But even if they just included this as a bonus 13th disc as another feature disc, that would have been great. So I do think that was an oversight. However, on the other hand, I can understand it not being included because it was several years down the road in 2003, but I really think they could have just gone ahead and tossed it in there. It is thankfully still in print. It's very cheap. It's available for less than $10, so it's not some rare disc you have to track down like what happened to the Batman Beyond feature film, Return of the Joker. That went out of print, so the Blu-ray got pretty pricey for a while until the complete series dropped on Blu-ray just a little while ago. But this is the one outlier outside of the box set if you want the whole animated series complete experience. Another reason why it should have been included, this has the little 6-minute silent short Chase Me, which was from a Paul Dini script, which is a great little fun Batman Catwoman short, which is really energetic and fun and in the new Batman Adventures style. So that should have been included in the series box set as well, and that's only found as an extra with this film. So if you've never seen this, this is sort of like the lone outlier animated series episode that got away. There's some good elements to it, and I covered it in a separate review if you're interested, but I do think this probably should have been included in the complete series box set just to have everything in one place. Just to give you an example of the packaging difference up close, it's really crazy when you look at how intricate the DVD sets were. So, of course, the Blu-ray is just in a standard case with simple and pretty straightforward, but again, very simple art choices with the discs on an actual spindle hub on a hinge. So this is the first volume of the series that was released in 2004, and they were staggered, so we had to wait a while to get the complete series. But this really sort of trademarked or started the animated Warner DC titles in this sort of ripped from comic book panels design that they went with on most of them in their first releases, most of them having a sort of yellowed background and then having this wonderful imagery and then these awesome matching spines. So all 4 volumes go together on a shelf. Each one has a certain color background they go with. Each box is loaded with images from the show, but then it's a nice slipcase. I think these Warner slipcase digipack affairs in the DVD realm really don't get enough credit because they had such a premium feel, but they were cheap to manufacture, and they still felt nice like a collector's piece, but they didn't take up a bunch of room. And most importantly, you got some nice images, and your discs were protected on actual disc trays. So I don't know why we can't go back to this, because, I guess we can have nice things. But the slipcase inside, or I should say the digipack, retains the art, but it's now in color, which was a nice touch, going from the stylized look to having nice color, the spines in color as well, and then you get more images on the back, keeping with this ripped from the comic book panels motif. Then when you open it, the really impressive touch was each panel is the contents of each disc with the episode guide, so you didn't need a printed episode guide. Then each disc's extras are listed under the feature section, so you can clearly tell where the extras are. And then each panel is only using images from the episodes from that respective disc. It's a little simple thing, but it's something I really appreciate. And also, I don't know how obvious this is, if you've never held one of these, there's a really thick, glossy finish on all of these volumes that I've always liked because it gives it a premium feel, and it has retained its quality all these years. So the one tricky thing about these is it's a complete fold out. You open it further and the disc 3 info is over here, and then open one more panel to get the final disc 4 info. So it's a little different, takes a little getting used to, of course. But as you can see, this is a beautiful, stylized, matching, complete set. And again, each panel is using imagery from the episodes on that respective disc. And then all the discs match in terms of their coloring. This goes for all 4 volumes, which followed the same design pattern. So you can tell it took somebody some time to put this together. There was some quality craftsmanship going on, and all the discs are properly protected. This is the type of stuff that we used to have in the DVD era for a lot of things. And this type of packaging does not cost too terribly much. So, if you want to do something fancy, at least make it as good as the fantastic DVD set packaging. All I'm trying to say is, between the DVD sets and the Blu-ray, there is a bit of a difference in terms of the fanciness. And of course, I am talking about the slimmed down Blu-ray set. If you got the limited edition set, you do have some more art, and all the episodes are printed in order in the again, the cardboard page book design, but those are terrible for discs. Even though Blu-rays are scratch resistant, you should never have discs packaged that way. I don't know why studios insist on doing that. So again, I think both of the iterations of the Blu-ray set are far inferior in terms of the package design and the quality and the layout design and the art. So that's another reason to hang on to your DVDs, because the sets themselves are just wonderful pieces that represent the show perfectly. So the final summary of Batman the Animated Series on Blu-ray is, unfortunately, to say it's the definition of a mixed bag is an understatement. This release is something that was long hoped for, wished for, and awaited by myself and pretty much every Batman fan in existence. And it's great we got the slimmed down package without the swag. It's at least got cases for the disc. The price point is nice, and it's frequently on sale. Came with a digital copy if you're into that sort of thing. But the problems that exist on this set are entirely because this was a studio label release and not a Warner Archive release. I know I say that a lot, but it's really frustrating to continually run into these problems, and it's entirely due to the practices and lack of quality control of the standard Warner Brothers studio label. So to summarize all of the issues, the transfers are, of course, different from their original broadcast masters. So that's why it's cool to hang on to your DVDs. However, that sort of thing is to be expected, which I discussed before. The problems are the poor compression, the use of too few discs for too many episodes. So you have too many episodes crammed onto too few discs. They all average in size. If you actually pop your disc into your PC and if you watch Blu-rays on your computer, and you can look at the actual episode sizes, they're all at about 2.5 or 2.75 gigabytes each. It's okay, but it should be a lot better. And that combined with the DNR usage really affects the image quite severely. You can tell the source scans were really great. So I think this set is hitting at only a percentage of what the original scans look like. And all of this is due to poor compression and the disk authoring and then the DNR application, none of which should be a problem. I don't think it would have been too much to ask to have, at least 2 or 3 more Blu-ray discs to have a better compression for the episodes and to completely skip the DNR application, which was totally unnecessary. This is something that the Warner Archive is able to do with all their animated releases with, proper compression and no DNR passes added. That should not have happened, which is really unfortunate, but again, is sort of to be expected when it's a studio release. The next aspect is all the glitches and errors that were introduced. As I mentioned and went over, the video portion of the glitches are thankfully rather minor, and you're probably going to run into one or two things whenever you have a complete show release, because it's just simply so much of amount of minutes and actual content of the actual show itself to go over, and to triple check every single frame with a limited amount of people on said project and a limited amount of time and money. It's understandable that some things are going to slip through. So the video portion of the errors is really not anything to really worry about, separate from the compression and DNR usage. I mean, in terms of goofs, errors, things like that. It's the audio errors and the defective audio on the select episodes that is a major problem. It is something that should have been caught. It is something that should have been the subject of a disc recall. I think it's ridiculous that these discs were not replaced. Things have been replaced for far less of an issue. The episodes in question really are unwatchable due to their defective audio tracks. And I've asked around with other people who have looked at the series on streaming, trying to find out if Warner Brothers ever fixed the streaming versions, which has happened on a few other Blu-ray releases. That, for example, on the release of the Scooby-Doo movies, which was again by the studio label and is an overpriced 2-disc set with too many episodes crammed onto too few discs, with a number of the same issues that Batman the Animated Series has. The episodes with issues on that set were corrected for the streaming release, and on the disc release, we were basically, just left up a creek. Well, apparently Warner Brothers has gone in and corrected the streaming episodes with defective audio, so I was able to confirm that with other fans. So once again, if you buy the Blu-ray release, you're stuck with crappy audio. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. This should have been corrected. These discs should have been recalled. It is the biggest and most obvious problem with this set, and is a real... I mean, it really sucks when, you go out of your way to buy the disc release, which has, should be superior to the streaming version, and then when they apply fixes, yes, I know it takes time and money, and you have to admit you made a mistake, and you have to do a disc recall program, but there should have been a disc recall program. It's so completely obvious that anyone will notice the defective audio on the selected episodes. So that's the biggest and most glaring problem, and it's really unfortunate that apparently they did correct the issue, but they felt it was only necessary to worry about the streaming market. So there you go. I was also able to confirm that apparently on the streaming versions, they did correct the end credits on the later shows. So as I mentioned before, one of the other major errors is that on the later shows like Adventures of Batman and Robin, they frequently have the incorrect music or have different end titles that are not accurate or correct. So apparently those were also corrected for the streaming version. So I guess in those two instances, the box set is the errored version 1.0 and the streaming versions are the corrected version 2.0. So that's also unfortunate. I can understand not doing a disc recall simply because the end credits have the wrong timing, have the wrong music on 15 episodes, but still, this is stuff that should have been caught, so sometimes you wonder, is anybody actually looking at this stuff? While I'm very glad that all of the original DVD extras have been carried over, including all the commentaries and the video commentary, I do think it's a shame and kind of ridiculous that we couldn't get the extra or two from the complete DVD box set. So not having those means the set is still technically incomplete, and to get those extras, you have to track down that very hard to find and rare, expensive DVD set, which apparently is also affected by the long-running Warner Brothers DVD rot issue, which I did a video on. So even if you found that DVD set just to get that extra featurette or two that is not included on the Blu-ray release, chances are those discs are rotted, so you've thrown your money away. So that's rather unfortunate. Also, I do think it would have been nice to include the 2003 Mystery of the Batwoman feature film. While technically, again, I can understand why it wasn't included. It wouldn't have really cost Warner Brothers very much money to, toss this disc in as well for full completeness sake. I think it would have been a nice touch, but I can understand why it wasn't included. But still, if you're already going to include the other two feature films, it would have been nice to include Mystery of the Batwoman, and especially nice if it had been given a better encoding, without all the aliasing and soft focus issues that this original disc has. Again, I do think the new documentary is really wonderful and gives you more inside information that maybe you didn't necessarily have before. I really appreciated that it was a feature-length documentary and not the usual featurettes for children or featurettes with the same folks doing the same interview pieces because they've been asked the same questions over and over. I would have loved even more extras, but it was a nice inclusion. So if you're a fan of the show and you don't have the Blu-ray set yet, that is a welcome reason to purchase it. So unfortunately, this is an extremely flawed release that is very frustrating. Most people will be able to live with this and enjoy it outside of the defective audio episodes, which are the most glaring problem. But the various errors I've gone over, along with the pretty substantial number of quirks and goofs in the audio mixes, particularly for the opening and closing titles, just adds fuel to the fire of frustration. This could have been a perfect release. This should have been a perfect release. All the materials were there. It's just problems that came through in the mastering and authoring process by the standard studio label. So once again, the moral of this story is I wish to heck this had been done by the archive division, who knocks it out of the park pretty much every time, and have done so with all their animated releases for the most part. They could have done this set and it would have not had the compression issues or the error issues. And had there been anything that happened, they sure as heck would have issued a recall statement pretty quickly. So that's the problem with this release. There were some corners cut. There are a number of errors and gaffes that unfortunately made it through. And that, combined with the compression issues and the application of DNR, which was really unnecessary, it really holds this set back. I hate to sound so negative, but when you have to start taking notes as you're rewatching one of your favorite shows simply because you keep running across various errors, and so by the time you finish, you have a whole page of notes for the various episodes with issues and quirks and problems, there's something wrong. It shouldn't be that obvious. And the fact that this set was released and the defective audio on the handful of episodes has never been corrected or officially addressed outside of quietly being fixed for the streaming platforms, along with fixing some of the later end credits that were wrong on the Adventures of Batman and Robin shows, is just insulting to those of us who purchased the series and hoped to get it on disc for years. So for those episodes, you will have to go back to your DVDs, or if you subscribe to HBO Max, you'll have to just watch those shows on HBO Max and stream them, because if you watch them on the disc, you're going to be stuck with very garbled and defective audio. And all that said, sadly, this is still an essential Blu-ray release. It is a giant leap forward over the old DVDs with their inherent issues from the broadcast masters and the way they were transferred. But outside of wanting to preserve the broadcast look, you have to hang on to your DVDs to have the correct audio for the defective episodes on this disc release. And the fact that this set has the DNR application, has the compression issues, in addition to the great number of audio errors. I mean, I still have to recommend it because it's one of the greatest shows ever made, and it is the definitive Batman adaptation that anybody has ever done to this day. It is one of the most timeless shows ever produced. It's a joy to revisit every couple of years and just fall back into the world of the animated series. But this Blu-ray is a frustrating release, to say the least. And so all I can say is get this when it's on sale. because it goes on sale for quite cheap, and it's still a handsome package that is better than the DVDs technically. But do keep in mind that it is fraught with issues, and all of those could have been avoided. Every single issue that I've gone over would have been avoided had this set gone through proper quality control checks and actually had been prepared by people who actually cared about the quality of the disc release themselves, such as the Warner Archive division, who regularly releases titles and animated shows without DNR issues and without compression issues. And they're a tiny division within the main studio. And also, they have less people working on their releases, and they do a better job than the main studio label 100% of the time. And so I wish to heck they had done this release, because then it would not have any of these issues. So Warner Brothers should have fixed the defective audio. There should have been a disc recall. There was not. So this is what we're stuck with, unfortunately. So do keep in mind the set does have a number of issues, actually quite a number of issues, but this is the best we can do for the time being. And it does frequently drop down to a ridiculously low price for one of the greatest television shows ever produced. Not only is it the greatest adaptation of Batman we've ever seen, but it's really the greatest adaptation of any comic character or comic story arc that we've ever experienced to this day. It has stood the test of time and will continue to do so. It is one of those shows that if you've never experienced it, it is just a whole new chapter opening up, and you embrace the world and the mythos of the Batman universe through Batman the Animated Series. So I wish this was perfect. I wish this didn't have any issues. And I wish it was encoded better. Ultimately, I wish to heck the Warner Archive had been able to do this release as they did beautiful jobs on the features. When you watch this series on Blu-ray and then you finish them, or whenever you jump over to the feature disc, it is a night and day difference in presentation, and the bit rates are maxed out on the archive disc. The presentations are spot on and gorgeous. The audio is perfect with all the dynamic range intact. They are meticulously done perfectly. And then you go back over to the episodes and you get all the usual quirks of a cutting corners standard Warner Studio label release. So it's really frustrating. I wish the Warner Archive had been able to do this series justice, because they would have. They would have done their usual amazing work with attention to care and detail, which is something that the studio label continues to not do on pretty much every release. So there are usually quirks and bad encoding jobs, which is typical of most studio labels. That kind of stuff happens. But the Warner Studio label continues to do this, and as always, the much smaller archive division shows them up at every turn. And you can really see the night and day difference between the two labels when you jump from the episode presentation to the two Warner Archive feature discs, which are replicated in this box set. They are the exact same disc, so you will notice that difference right off the bat. It's not just because they were the feature films. The presentation should be the same quality level on the episodes and the features, and unfortunately they are not. Unfortunately, this release does have a number of flaws. I still highly recommend it as one of the greatest shows ever made. The new transfers are really just breaths of fresh air for these episodes. You will notice things you never noticed before, but you will have to live with the studio label cutting corners, with the poorer compression and some of the artifacts that entails, and the various quirks and things introduced in the making of these discs, particularly the various audio issues, and most of all, the defective audio on those episodes, which should have never been released that way. They should have been recalled and addressed and fixed, and replacement discs should have been issued. This never happened. It's something Warner Brothers should have done, because the audio on those episodes is completely defective. So again, I highly recommend this set. It is a must-own set, but you have to understand the number of drawbacks that go along with it. So that's why this video is a little bit longer, because there were so many things to cover. And again, I will post all my notes for the various episodes of things that I found, of various quirks or issues with the audio or the credits or things like that. So at least you'll have a more comprehensive thing to check if you want to look at some of these discs yourself and see if you can spot the things I found or maybe some things I missed. So that is the Warner Brothers Studio label release of Batman the Animated Complete series on Blu-ray. Again, I wish it didn't have these issues, but it's still a must-own Blu-ray release of one of the greatest television shows ever produced. That really doesn't even need saying, but I'll say it again for those who aren't quite familiar with the animated series, which obviously I am a bit obsessed with, as you should be. It is that magical of an experience. It is the definitive Batman adaptation to this day, and the entirety of the DC animated universe rests on its broad shoulders. So, as always, thank you ever so much for watching and listening to me babble. I hope this has been informative. It's been something I've worked on for quite some time. It took a lot of note taking and double checking and double checking with the original DVD releases, and going back and forth and scrolling through a lot of forums and asking questions and trying to compare my notes with other people's notes about the defective audio and things like that. So I tried to give a general overview of all the particular issues with this release. But again, I will include all of my episode notes about particular issues I found. So if you want to find the specifics about which episodes are affected by things like this is a show you will want to come back to time and time again. And that, of course, all fans know that already. So I will, of course, be diving into the animated series every year or two, just like I did with the DVDs for years, ever since I started buying them as soon as they came out, one volume at a time. And with that, I just want to also say, as I always do, keep physical media alive, keep your disc spinning, and I think Alfred is tired of me talking because he really wants to polish the silver.